You can create web pages using HTML, but with the knowledge of CSS, you can create even better web pages. Not only that, by using CSS, you can even have a better control in designing, managing, and maintaining your web pages. So you might be wondering, are we talking about replacing HTML with CSS? The answer is no. We are not talking about replacing your HTML skill with CSS. Rather, we are talking about extending the capability of HTML with CSS. Hello, this is Feroz, and you are learning how to lay out web pages using CSS. Similar to my HTML tutorial, I have broken down this tutorial into a number of lessons. This is our first lesson, and I call it Introduction to CSS. To follow up with my subsequent lessons, please consider subscribing the channel. Alright, without any further ado, let's look at the list of the topic that we are covering in our today's lesson.
Let's start with the topic number 1. What is CSS? CSS is the short form of Cascading Style Sheet. It is a language, also called style sheet language, which is used to create a style sheet. A style sheet is a document written in a style sheet language to define or describe presentation of the contents written in a markup language, such as HTML, XML, and so on. The difference between HTML and CSS is the HTML was created to describe the content, whereas CSS was created to describe the presentation of the content. Let's look at the following scenario to make this clearer. We have a simple HTML document which looks like this. When you view this HTML document on a web browser, it will look like this, which is very simple and plain without a CSS file attached to it. Now the same HTML file with a CSS file attached to it might look something like this, which is more presentable. So you can see, using CSS file, you can make your content more presentable by changing the look and feel of the document. This is what we said, CSS take care of the presentation of your HTML document. You should have some idea by now about objective of CSS. The main objective of creating CSS is to separate the presentation from the contents of a markup language, which means a markup language such as HTML will focus into describing contents, whereas CSS will focus into describing how to display that contents in terms of look and feel of the content, such as page layout, page color, font size, margin, padding, and so on. By separating the presentation from the contents, you can easily use the same style sheet into multiple pages or throughout the website, which not only saves your designing efforts and time, but also allow you to manage the look and feel of your website by updating or changing only a single CSS file. With this flexibility of separating presentation, you can even incorporate professional third-party design into your website. The fundamentals of CSS syntax are governed by a set of rules, which is consisted of a selector and a declaration block. The selector refers to an HTML element. The declaration is consisted of one or more set of property and value. Property and value must be separated by a colon. If you have more than one property and value set, each set must be separated by a semicolon. Let's look at some examples. In this example, I have redefined the paragraph tag P with the color and font size property following the rules of CSS syntax, where P is the selector, which is the HTML element for paragraph tag. Color is the property for changing the text color of the paragraph. We have defined the color as blue, which means all the text within the paragraph element will be displayed as blue. Similarly, we have changed the font size of the paragraph to 14 pixels. We can also rearrange the syntax like this. Now let's redefine the two heading elements H1 and H2 that we have used in our simple HTML document. For H1 element, we have used text align and text transform properties. The text align property can take any of the text alignment values such as left, right, center, or justify. The text transform property is used to change the text to uppercase or lowercase characters. We have also used text decoration property with heading 2 element to underline the text. There are 3 different ways you can add CSS to your HTML document. For inline style, CSS codes are directly written in an HTML element using the style attribute. Inline style doesn't have any effects on the other instance of the same HTML element. Let's look at an example of using inline style. For internal style, the whole list of CSS codes are written in a head section of each HTML file using HTML style element. The internal style affects all the instances of the same HTML elements used within the HTML page. Internal style might be appropriate for the situation where each page on the website has unique presentation design or style. For external style sheet, the whole CSS code for the website is maintained in one or more separate files. You add the reference of the CSS file to each HTML page using the link element in the header section of the HTML file. To create an external CSS file, let's cut off the CSS code segment within the style element from our previous HTML example file. Our external CSS file now should look like this. Let's save the file as default CSS. Now let's make a reference to the CSS file from our HTML page so that the presentation defined in the CSS file will have the effects on the HTML elements. Organizing your style sheet requires detailed planning about your site layout and theme. Based on the type of website, you have to decide what kind of layout and theme you want for your website. The layout you decide will define the orientation of the page in terms of the section and subsection of the page, such as top, bottom, left, right, center, and so on. The theme of the site will decide page color, text size, fonts, border, margin, and so on. Let's assume you are creating a website which will have 10 pages. So you should decide a layout which will suit to all the pages. Though there are sites which have multiple layouts, but it is better to have one standard layout. Similarly, you should stick into same theme for all the pages. Having different theme for different pages doesn't give good impression to users. You might have multiple CSS files for different media such as screen, print, handheld, etc. If you have a multiple CSS file, you should create a folder by the name CSS to keep all the CSS files. Organizing your CSS file in a proper order will help you to manage them easily.
Okay guys, that's all for our today's lesson. If you have any query, please write in the comment section. If you haven't subscribed the channel, please consider subscribing. See you in our next lesson. Until then, happy learning.